Module 2. Content. Lab 2. Lab 2 is project number 11. It's this do not disturb sign. And we have that in two different ways that you can model it, at least for the videos. We have one that was created with AutoCAD, and we have the other one that was created with SolidWorks. The exercise is located right here from the 20 projects book. And here it is, our do not disturb sign. And it's modeled in generic CAD. In other words, anybody with a CAD system can draw it this way. You could draw it with a pencil. What units are these? These are millimeter units. And so 3D printers like to work with metric. And so this is 128 millimeters by 55 millimeters. And so what we do is we model the rectangle, and then we go through and we make the geometry so that it looks like this. And then we export it as an STL. CAD works differently with letters and numbers or with text, because remember, it's not a word processor. It's a computer-aided design tool. And so as we look at these different models, we have an AutoCAD model, and I don't believe we gave you the SolidWorks model, but I do have it. And so I'll bring it up on the screen. We'll start with the AutoCAD model. I can download that, and I can open that. It says that it's a warning. It was created in a student version. And what that means is it's not a good idea to take things from work and use those for that. And so I'm going to say, open it, and here is my part. And so it basically just has this text on here, and the text is editable. And so you could edit this if you'd like. You know, I could say, you know, Joe's meeting in progress. Of course, it's not cooperating, but I think you get my meaning. And so we'll say, okay. And then there are some tools that we use here. Now, if I change the perspective on this, I can go and I can extrude this. And I'm just gonna, you know, just extrude it down 5 millimeters, okay? And so what I would do is I would go and make a region out of the outside shape, because when you work with CAD and you work with solids, you have to have enclosed boundaries, and that's all we're doing. We want to make sure that all the endpoints are lined up so that they touch. And then what we do is we seal everything together by making it into a region. Now it just used the current layer, which is fine. If I want to switch it to a different layer, I can do that. I'll go back to my object layer, and then I'll see it in blue. And then what I can do is I can extrude that. And so I'm just going to type in the extrude command. I could also, I guess I won't, I'll use the 3D modeling. And we have videos for this, so this is just another way to do the same thing. And so I'll extrude this, I'll select that region, and then I'll extrude it down, and I'm just going to go 5 millimeters. I would have to check what the exact number is, but what is the exact number, Al?
2, I believe.
2. So let me undo that, and I'll extrude it again. And I'll go down 2 millimeters. Great. And then what I'll do is I like to put this on a separate layer. And so I'm going to go back to my two-dimensional drafting and annotation. And it looks like it is on the text layer. So I'm going to put it back to the object layer. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn that object layer off. Then I'm going to take a top view, and I didn't need to turn it off. I could have just froze it. And I'm going to go with the top view. And then what I would do here when you work with AutoCAD is you have to change the text into CAD geometry. And the way we do that is with these express tools. And so with these express tools, we want to explode the text. I'm going to use the menu bar, And then I'm going to use the express tools here. It's just easier for me to find what I want. And I'm going to say explode the text, and I'm going to explode the text here. And you can put anything on there that you want, provided that it doesn't violate student conduct codes. And so I'll explode that. And as you can see now, the geometry, the letters have turned into geometry, or vector-based geometry. Vector meaning that we have lines for that. And then what we can do is we can go back to our home screen. I'm on the text layer, and I can go and change to an isometric view. And I can kind of zoom in on that. And then I can extrude these. And so I'll come back here and I'll say extrude. I like to type in the commands. It's easier than to go and find them all the time. And I can just put a box around these, hit enter. And then I can bring them up because I went down with the other part. And so I'm going to go up 1 millimeter if my computer will not freak out on me. And that's what it did. It went through, and now they have a little bit of a thickness to them. And so we went down 2 millimeters, and then we went up 2 millimeters. And so here's my sign. And it looks like I need to make a slight adjustment. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the part from this point right over here. I'm just going to move it down in the z-axis. I'm going to move it down 1 millimeter. And that way the letters should be on top. Maybe they were okay before. I think they were okay before, so I'm going to undo that. Let's just go back where we extruded those. And let's just make them thicker. So we can extrude these, and if I have both the layers on, maybe it'll be easier to see it. So I'm going to turn them both on. And then I'm going to say extrude. And let's go with, let's just look at it. It looks like it's on the top. And so we'll extrude that. And then I'm going to go put a box around these. And I'm going to hold shift and unselect that. And there we go. And so it looks to me like, let's just go with an even 2 millimeters. There we go. So that's how I would create that part in CAD. And then what I would do would be to union these parts so that there's different ways that we can do this. One way is that we can subtract out the letters and then we can print them separately and make them like jigsaw pieces. That's what we'll go into later. It works really great for a single extrude nozzle like we have with the Dremels. Another way is we could change the filament color while it's printing. But in order to get one model and not one with a J, one with an O, one with an E, we need to fuse all of these components together with the union command. So we'll union them. And there we go. I'll export it. Other file formats. And we'll just throw this on the desktop. And I'll save that by clicking on it. Notice that all of it is selected, the letters and the hardware. And then we'll go into our Dremel slicer and we'll get that part. And so I'll come over here, open, and then I'm going to go to my desktop. And since the metric title block was used, we're all set for that. I'm going to set up the slicer for low quality. I'll prepare it. And then I can take a look at it. And so as we look at it, we can see the layers for the lettering. we can see the infill pattern. And so we start off layer 1, we start to build. And then as we get to layer 9, etc. All right, so it takes 13 layers to make this on low quality. It's going to take 57 minutes to run this part. And then what I would do is I would save this to a file, and then I would print it. So let me grab a USB, and I'm going to insert that.
Hey, Joe,
Yes, Al?
is there a way they can save it with a different name on it?
Most definitely.
Can you
Most
show us that way?
So to change the name of the file, there's this little pencil down here. And so if I click on this little pencil, I can save this as JC Lab 2, which I like better because then I can find these on the USB. I get so many of them. I'm going to hit Save to Removable Drive. And then I'll eject it, put it onto this Samsung drive, and I'll eject it. And I probably, and I could show the G codes for that. Let me do another save to a file, and I'm just going to save it to the desktop. And so the files themselves are G code files. And so here it is. You read G code files with a word processor. Old technology, and the old ones are the best sometimes. And so I'll say open with Notepad. The reason I like Notepad is because it doesn't add any special characters. And so these are what are called remarks. Okay, and so looks like this was created. I'm not sure why it says Marlin on here, because maybe it should say my name. And it goes through with these different G codes. M codes are miscellaneous codes. Those are typically for like things like fans. It looks like this is setting up like a speed for it. I've got to get better with my 3D printer G codes. I know my CNC G codes, but what we're looking at here is X, Y, and Z positioning for each of the movements of the 3D printer head. Once we have the G code files, and I have it on the USB and I have it ejected, I'm going to take that out, and then I'm going to stop sharing. And everybody should be able to see my camera now, right? Al, you can just tell me, right? You can see the USB. So what we'll do here is we'll prepare the build plate. And to prepare the build plate, what we'll do is we'll take this build plate and then we'll get some glue, and we'll use this. Now this one has been used, so it has to be cleaned. It still has some of the glue residue on it. It cleans off with water. We get our build plate, and then the orientation of that was, I would say, right about here. And as you go through and apply the glue, just a light coat.
What happens if you put too much glue on it, Joe?
It gets really messy, and it doesn't necessarily help adhere it. It bumps up against the nozzle. So I'm going to go and take this and put it into the 3D printer. And so as you remember, I went through here and I purged it and I changed the filament. I'll open the door, place that in, close the door, get my file, place this in. And then we'll go to build, and we will find the name of it. So let's see here. 57 minutes. And let me see if I can. Get this a little closer. I need to get a video tech now. I'll go to build. It'll copy the file. And then it will go through the startup routine, which is to go and check to see if the plate's level. You can see there's a little bit of material. See if I can turn off the light. Okay. I'm gonna pause the video.
Joe, before you pause video,
Sure.
go back into the Dremel itself.
We'll go to a screen share.
And
So
if
which one?
some reason you have a project that is too large for the plate itself, how do you adjust it? Is there a certain number versus metric versus US that it makes it so it fits or it can get done correctly?
Those are great questions. You can scale it if you select it, and you can select scaling. So let's say I don't have an hour. I want to get this done in half the time. You can scale it 50% and make micro. And then you have to re-prepare it. You can see that when we scaled it, though, we lost a lot of the detail and the resolution. I can bring it back to 100%.
Even if you bring up the layers slide?
Re-prepare it. What's that at?
Okay, there it is. 13 layers.
And so, yes, there's a number of things that we can do with that. We can have more than one on the build plate. I can say multiply selected object. And let's say I want two more. And then I need to re-prepare it.
Do we want to put a skirt in this or don't need a skirt in this?
I think we probably would. And I didn't put one on it, but what has a tendency to happen, and we'll see if it fails, is that as the material temperature changes and cools, it begins to lift up on the edges. And so sometimes what you'll have is a build that's warped. And that's what these build plate adhesions do. And so I like rim because it'll be really adhered really well to it, like that. It does increase my build time, but that's not going to come off.
Oh, okay, great.
And that's one of the bigger problems is if I have to wait 3 hours for these, gosh, 2.5 hours into it, it starts to warp, and that's 3D printing. That's what tends to happen. All right, so it looks like our part is going to get set to run. So I'm going to stop the share and we'll take a look at our first layer. Should be able to see the first layer build. Let's take a look at that. And then we'll check back on this in an hour and we'll have our art printed. Okay, so with that, this is the lab 2 exercise. I'm going to go back to my screen sharing and we're going to wrap up this video. So the idea is to take the part, bring it into CAD, and then to be able to slice it. If you're a SolidWorks person, and I do both, here's my SolidWorks part. If I were to finish this. When you work with text on SolidWorks, it's much easier. It's much nicer, actually. So if I wanted to add some more text to this, and the way you work with SolidWorks, I recommend you really need a course for SolidWorks. AutoCAD you can kind of figure out, but if I were to go in here and I wanted to edit this, the nice thing about SolidWorks is it has this design tree, and so I can go back and look at how this was made, and so I can go through and show the first sketch today. And so here's what I created from a sketch. And it's really the same thing. It should be, I need one more dimension to fully define it. But if I take a top view of this, here's my part. The reason it's blue is it needs a smart dimension to the origin. Whenever they're blue, it's typically because it doesn't know where it's at. And so if I put one of these dimensions on it, it will usually make everything fully defined. I probably need another one here. When I work with text, what I do is I go through and in the Boss Extrude, here's my sketch tool, editing. And then in the sketch tool, I'll come back to that. There we go. I'm trying to get it to kind of jump into the word processor, but it's not. So I'll just show how to do it a different way. So when I work with text on SolidWorks, what I do is I create a sketch on the surface of it. And what I do is I put a center line. And these are in the video. And then I go and I can then, once I have the center line on there, I can then go into the text tool. And it will use this line to line things up. And then I can say, Joe and Al's video conference. And then I can go through and make this text bold. I can go into the tools for this by unchecking that and then coming here to the font. And I can make this a little bit bigger. And then I can OK that. And then I can extrude it by turning it into a feature and extrude it. And we'll extrude this 2 millimeters. That's about right. A green check mark it. And then as an industrial design type person, I like to work with the beach ball here. And we can go through and then if I want to color my last feature here, I believe that's the one. I can go with blue is the color for the blue. And that's how SolidWorks works with text and CAD. And then if we were to take a look at the part itself, and I switch the camera down.
And when this thing builds, how does it build inside? If we cut this part in half, Joe, what do we see?
Hang on a minute now, I'll come back to that. So here's the part that was created. Let me see if I can turn on that light again. With SolidWorks. And the lettering itself is really clean. So I had very good lettering in SolidWorks. And then with the AutoCAD, it's a little bit rougher. Not quite as clean because of the way it sliced the model. Just sort of here's how it turned out with the different softwares, and we can kind of, work with these different softwares to see how this works. See if I can clean up my work area a little bit. I recommend one of these mats. These are really good. And I also recommend that you get yourself a caliper with millimeters on it. And there's one other thing that I talked about before I end this recording, was we talked a little bit about infill in patterns. And I was talking about some of the things that I had made. And one of them is like working on like this lighted checkerboard. And so I have this hole in the bottom, and my plan was to backlight them. And then they make great Christmas gifts, right? Nothing like something from home. And so some of the infill patterns that we can look at on some of these projects now, as we work with them, we'll be able to have like sort of a hollow infill patterns. This is sort of a honeycomb. And I'm using a semi-transparent green material on this one, and this one's just sort of an opaque white. And this one's a little hard to see, but it's got kind of a concentric form to it. All right, so that's basically a review of lab number 2 and some of the CAD information. I'm going to go back to our main screen, share that, and then come back here to D2L and our slicing software. So the project is to create this do not disturb sign. You can use either AutoCAD or SolidWorks. There is a student file that you can download for the AutoCAD, and then there are 2 tutorials to walk you through it. Don't forget to take the review questions, or to do the review questions at the end of the chapter. Al will put a due date on that of 2 weeks from today. So we'll make that due in 2 weeks, about the 22nd. With that, I'm going to stop the recording and open things up for questions.
I don't currently have a question right now because since I'm on Mac, it's missing the text explode option.
Just one more minute.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.